All right. I'm ready when you are. I'll just check if my presenter is working. No, it's not.
Okay, I think we are on. Well, good afternoon, or maybe good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. This is lesson 5 of session 3 of the Zero to Hero mentorship program. Today we have Tomasz Poszytek. I almost got it right. Almost. Oh man, we'll get it right. In lesson
Well
5,
done.
we'll be talking about error handling and
Yes,
uh, exception handling in um, in Power Automate. So
indeed. Debugging
Thomas,
and
it's all
exceptions.
yours, and thanks for trying new things with us today. Really appreciate it. It's looking good.
Thank you. I just have to be really sure that this thing is working. And it does. All right. Okay. So, hello everyone. Hello again. We've seen each other a week ago. I think and I hope that you still remember me and that possibly most of you is the same audience that I have met last week. If not, then I would like to welcome you again to my session. I mean, to this lesson, actually. That's a kind of a lesson where I will be talking about exceptions handling and debugging in Power Automate. This is the second one, in my opinion, the most important thing after approvals in Power Automate. One thing before I begin, if there is any kind of issue with my transmission or my voice or the vision, just let me know on chat. I'll try to monitor the chat on a separate screen. So hope to be able to react in time. And thank you, Victor, for organizing this mentorship program. And as before, I'm still very glad to be part of that, and I'm really glad that I'm able to share my knowledge with you. And I memorize most of what I'm going to share. Just for those who, again, don't know who I am or we haven't met before anywhere. My name is Tomasz Poszytek. I'm coming from Warsaw in Poland. Come on, slide switch. No. Love the technology. Can I just check one thing because I will be using that. And you see, it doesn't work. Oh, gosh. Please give me a moment. I need to find out why this spotlight thing is not working. Okay, well, for some reason it doesn't work. Well, okay, whatever. I'll just, well, I have to live without it. So anyway, I'm working with Power Automate and Power Platform basically for nearly 5 years, like ever since Power Automate started to be in public preview. I started to work with that. I somehow transitioned from SharePoint workflows and Nintex workflows to Power Automate, well, Power Microsoft Flow back then. And this is basically, the Power Platform basically is the area that I'm working with in my everyday job. And as well, that is also something I'm really interested and I'm doing as well in my free time because as part of the Microsoft Most Valuable Professionals Program or Award, I'm as well contributing a lot around those technologies. So nevertheless, SharePoint Microsoft is the world that I'm working in for over 10 years already. And then if you're interested in what I'm writing, what I'm doing, then you can go into this URL that is aka.ms/poszytek. It is here at the bottom. So you can try to memorize it as the first thing to remember. And then you'll find every hyperlink to every social media channel that I'm present at, like YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and whatever. So if you'd like to stay connected with me, go there and let's connect. Okay, so moving forward, the agenda for today is a bit shorter than it was last week. Or maybe it's not because The point 6 last week was just demos. So first, I'll be talking about general information around catching errors, like why do we do that, what are errors, and so on. And then I'll try to show you and help you to understand some basic and more advanced patterns.
I think we lost Tomasz. Was it only me or everybody else?
No, it was a glitch on my side.
Okay.
Is it fine, right?
Is it? It is
Okay.
fine.
Some interrupt.
Yeah, that was just a small interruption. I hope it won't happen again. So nevertheless, then I'll show you something about application insights and generally about logging errors in Power Automate. And then we'll switch to debugging. Debugging basics. So again, why do we do that? How can we do that? And then, why do we do that? And basically what debugging is for. And then I'll show you what are the options to debug your flows in Power Automate. All right, ready? So let's go. First, let's just go through the error handling. So basically, the world that we're living in, the IT world, the applications, the software, we as humans are really angry and annoyed every time we see an error that is just being displayed to our eyes and that application simply gets suspended or hanged and we cannot continue our work or we lose our work and that the application itself really just crashes and does nothing else. The blue screen of death or the green screen of death that some of us also have if we are Windows insiders is the most explanatory example. Like anytime that we are working with Windows and application crashes, the operation system crashes and displays a blue error, we are really, really angry and annoyed because most probably we're working on something important and this thing is lost. And we're then blaming Microsoft that they have designed that operation system in a way that is simply able to crash that way that we're losing our work and that we're unable to continue. But that thing also applies somehow to low-code applications and low-code solutions. So if we are designing Powerapps or if we are doing Power Automate flows, there we are also able to design them in a way that in some specific scenarios, they can crash, they can get suspended, they can get canceled or timed out in a way that doesn't actually allows the participants to continue their work. And that is also somehow frustrating for them. So basically, ever since IT or programming was evolving or started, there has been a pattern called try, catch, finally. In programming, it's basically used to wrap the code that we expect may fail for any reason. So we wrap that code in a try block. Then in a catch block, we simply write instructions for the application to handle the error, like maybe to try to resume or send notification to the user or just somehow work around that issue. And then in finally block, that is optional. It sometimes appears, sometimes not. So in finally block, we write
I think we lost you again, Tomasz. You're back?
Hey, sorry. Yeah, I'm back. I just don't know why my laptop is disconnected from Wi-Fi. Gosh. Okay, so and then in finally block, we just put those instructions that will be executed no matter what happens in the try or catch, right? So they will be executed always. And so this kind of pattern simply provides these kind of tools to programmers, to developers, that they can use to build applications, they can build solutions that are able to catch errors. And therefore, even if there is an error, this error can be caught and handled so that the user is either informed or there is like a some kind of backup code being executed, some kind of workaround, like there is some kind of information or other instructions being executed that actually makes this error shown to a user less frustrative or less problematic because application is able to catch it and then handle it somehow. Maybe save the work elsewhere so that even if user then refreshes application, the work is still going to be there waiting for them and then they are able to resume. And so this is also important to know that in Power Automate, we are able to catch errors and we have to catch them. But basically, what are the ways that we can learn about errors in Power Automate today? So first, we can go into Cloud Activity Monitor. That is a kind of new tool that you can find under Monitor. I will show you that in a moment. Still doesn't work. And this Cloud Flow Activity Monitor shows you a list of all runs of your cloud flows in recent days, in the past days, together with information about their outcomes, so whether they completed successfully or there was a failure. And then you can as well filter out, so you can just use this navigation here at the top right corner to filter out only flows that have failed. And then once you click that tile, that information here, you'll be simply navigated to that instance which failed, and there you can read more information about the error. Now, this monitor is very useful because it shows you an overview of all cloud flows that are running on a specific environment. So this gives you this kind of a Hawkeye view on how your flows on that environment are performing. The second thing I can use is the runs history, so the information about all the instances of a specific flow. So if you have a flow that is very highly being used and you know that your business is like quite dependent on that, and you want to be sure that the flow is running, you can have this thing like opened up and you can simply monitor and refresh it over and over again. And then if you see an error, you can simply somehow react.
Oh, it's off again, Tomasz.
Hey, I don't know what's going on, really, honestly. So where were I? I was speaking about these instances, and I hope that you caught it, that I said that if you click on any of these lines, you'll be simply navigated to that specific instance of the flow that either failed or was completed. So there you can simply look for more information about the reason why the flow actually failed. Now, there is as well a thing that is called the Powerapps Admin Center. So the one at the bottom that displays information about, again, the runs, and you can filter to see only errors. So you have, again, information about all the errors that have happened in a specific environment in all the flows that have been triggered. But here you don't have actually a lot of information. So just like see the name of the flow and who created the flow, but there is not much information about the reason. There's just this pie chart displayed. And it only displays information for the past 28 days maximum. Plus, it shows information after, I think, 1 day. So it's not ad hoc, but you have to wait like a day to see information from the past day. There is also Power Platform Admin Center, the Power Platform Center of Excellence, although this Power BI report doesn't really show information about Cloudflow errors. So it does have a view that shows errors in desktop flows, so in RPA. However, for cloud flows, it shows no information about errors. And don't know why. Maybe one day it will start. You know what? Maybe I'll just hide myself from this recording. Maybe this way is gonna be better. All right. So on the other hand, we have like third-party applications we can use, like Flow Studio from John Liu. This is it's not a free application. It's called a freemium. So you have like basic features for free, but then if you want to go deeper into functionality, you have to pay some monthly fee. Nevertheless, this solution also shows information about how the flows are performing in a specific environment. So you can see like how your flows are running, which were errored, how many errors there were, and so on and so on. So this is like what the Flow Studio looks like. And as mentioned in Power Platform Admin Center, you can just have like an overview of how the flows are performing in a specific environment. And last but not least, if you do face any errors, or maybe if there are any errors in Power Automate, then Power Automate itself is sending weekly digest with the information about the have to open every flow one by one to see why they were failing in the last week. And by week, I don't mean that it is sent like every Monday or every Sunday. I don't know when actually this mail is sent, but it's really sent like once a week. In my case, it's sent on Wednesdays, I guess. So the point is that with all these tools that I just showed you, you are able actually to like be somehow reactive on the errors. So you can track, you can monitor, you can just see what happens in your flows. And then once you see an error, you can react. This is not very good because if you're not really having those monitors open and you're not refreshing them all the time, then you'll possibly acknowledge that there has been an error in a flow. Once business contacts you saying, hey, I'm waiting for this approval for like 2 days already, and this approval hasn't reached me yet. So maybe there is an error. Can you check? And then you navigate to that flow and you see, oh gosh, there was an error 2 days ago, and the flow has actually failed. And then you cannot really say to the business, okay, I got you covered, because the flow is already terminated. So the goal in error handling in Power Automate is actually to build flows that even if they face error, they are still able to continue their operation. At least they're able to notify you that there has been an error, so that you can actually somehow work more proactively and be the first one to know that there is an error before really business contacts you, and then you find yourself in a bad situation that you cannot actually do anything more. So speaking about the error handling patterns, so what can we do to catch errors in Power Automate? Basically, if you navigate to Power Automate portal and then you hit to create a new flow from template, and you type in catch or try into the search box, you will find one and only template that is called try, catch, and finally. Now, once you authenticate, once you create all these connections that are required and you hit continue, you'll see this kind of a construction. So you'll see 3 scopes: the try scope, catch scope, and final scope, and some relations between them. And so the point is that you put all the logic in a try scope, then you write the error handling in a catch scope, and eventually, if you need to have something run always, you can write the logic in the finally scope. So this is the pattern, the try catch pattern in Power Automate. What is it using? So how is it built? What are the features in Power Automate that are being used? So first, one of the most important functionality that we have in Power Automate, that is called the run after. So once we click this ellipsis icon here on a catch, or on on every action, on any action. So whatever action you have in your Power Automate, and you click the ellipsis icon, you'll see that there is this menu displayed and an option called configure run after. The run after basically is a configuration that tells that specific action for which you're configuring it, under which circumstances it should be run. So what should happen in a previous action to let that action to be executed. You have 4 options. So you can decide that next action, the one that we are now configuring, should be run if the previous one has completed successfully, or if it has failed, or if it was skipped, or if it has timed out, or any of the combinations. But you have at least choose one. So at least one is mandatory, but you can choose 4. So for example, when speaking about the catch block, we obviously have to select only has failed. So the catch block will only be executed if the try scope failed. Speaking about the final scope, the finally block, the finally block should be executed no matter what happens in the previous action. So either if catch scope is completed successfully, or has failed, or was skipped, or was even timed out. So whatever happens to catch scope, the finally will be executed. This is how it works in Power Automate. But what are scopes? Well, scope is a very as well important piece of construction of action in Power Automate that actually helps you in two things. First is the readability of the Power Automate. So if you do have a very large flow with lots of actions and it's really hard to digest what is this flow doing, what is its logic, you can put groups of actions or group of actions into a scope that will then allow you to collapse and expand that group of actions. And so if you put those groups into scopes, you are then able to simply collapse parts of your flow's logic that makes the whole logic of the flow easier to read and easier to understand. So this is the first thing that we can use scopes for. The second one is basically the one that we are using for error handling. So scope is like a mirror, actually. Whatever happens inside the scope is being reflected on the scope level. So whatever happens in no idea. So if the action in scope fails, the scope itself is going to fail as well. Why it is important? Because when we are doing this construction on the catch and on the try and catch scopes, then the catch scope actually is going to be executed if the try scope fails. So that means if any action within the try scope fails. All right, so let me now jump over to demos. I'm really sorry about these connectivity issues. That hasn't been happening before, so I don't really know what to do. Possibly computer restart should could solve it, but I have no time for that. Sorry, wrong screen. Where was I? Here? No. Sorry. Why are you here? There. All right. So first, that's the flow that is actually being used. So anyway, I will show you now error handling across several scenarios. Basically, each scenario is about the same goal. So imagine that I do have now a SharePoint site script that is actually calling Power Automate once the site provisioning is over. And this flow actually is its only purpose is to get information about the recently provisioned site and to notify the person who requested this provisioning with information that, hey, this site has been provisioned. And now, one more information, like why do we actually need to catch errors in Power Automate, apart from the fact that I just told that we are like in front or ahead of the business, that we already know something is going on. So what is going on? So basically, even though that we do create our flow and we think that everything is configured fine, that everything is working, we are still like a subject to the third party effects or situations. I mean that if we do create a flow that is taking information from other sources, there is always a possibility that this flow is going to fail because of those third-party applications that are being used in our flow. So for example, in my case, I'm calling Graph API to get information about recently provisioned site, and like in here, and my authentication token, which I have here, this secret key, is expired, or that we are getting data from sorry. or that the SharePoint file that we're trying to use in Power Automate is being locked, exclusively locked by someone for editing. And so Power Automate is unable to use it, or that SQL Server table schema has been changed, or like anything that we're trying to get an access to, but there was someone else in the middle who made the modification, and therefore our flow is just unable to query the data source. And so it fails. And so for any of such scenarios that we are calling third-party applications, we are calling something from outside of the Power Automate, which may be a subject to failure, we should think about some kind of error handling, either in general, so like we just create one catch blocks, and we are getting just simple notification that something went wrong, or if this is a very very important step in Power Automate in the logic, we should think about handling exceptions on that specific stage. And so in my case, let me just find now Postman. So as you can see, the logic is quite simple. Once this newly provisioned site is completed, site script is calling this Power Automate via HTTP request. Then Flow is getting information about that site and sending email notification to the person who created that site with information that this site has been created. So let me just trigger it. I mean, I want just do it fast and once. So first things goes correct. First example goes correct, goes successfully. The site has been provisioned and the flow has completed successfully. Now, if, for example, the token that I've been using, so the secret that I've been using has expired or has changed, let's just add one letter here. And now a new site is provisioned. And just a moment. And now the flow is executed. Obviously, it is going to fail. Furthermore, the requester, so my postman, what I'm using here on the site, gets this information, like no response, like no information why it failed, just like no feedback from the upstream, because actually that action which is used to send response is on the is the last one. So it's being executed after the whole logic is executed. And so it failed. Now, what can we do in such a scenario? Let me go to a second example where I have very easy error handling. So right now I'll call this second Power Automate. Oh, now that is interesting. All right, it's being sent. However, in this case, I get at least information that I'm unauthorized, so at least I know what went wrong, and as well information back from the flow that there has been an error. And now this example is using the first pattern for error handling. I mean, the easiest one. So using the parallel branch. You can recall this pattern as well from last time when we were talking about approvals. I was also using this parallel branch for approvals, but it's still something around the error handling. So basically, I know that this action may fail because it's the only one that actually is getting information from the outside world. And then if it doesn't fail, I'm executing the left branch, which is simply getting information straight from the outcomes and then sending this confirmation email. So this action, configuration run after, is simply set to run only if HTTP request ends up successfully. However, I know that this action can fail, so I as well added a second branch that is being executed only if that action fails for whichever reason. So if it's failed or it's skipped or it's timed out. And so in that case, what happened? I got information on my mail that this Cloudflare has actually failed and information about the failure. Plus, there has been this response sent together with the status code and the information that it was error. So this is the very, very easy error handling that you can use to simply catch errors on a specific action. Then obviously you can create some more logic if you catch that error. So you can maybe create a second call, or you can try to get information about that site from other source. Maybe you have put information about that site on a SharePoint list, and then you can get this from there if you're unable to get them from Graph API. So like the logic behind it is up to you. All right, so let's go on to the third example. The third example is a bit more complex because, I mean, not complex, more advanced, because it is already utilizing the try-catch pattern. So what you can see here is that the flow has ended successfully, even though it shows me that the response is 400. So something went wrong with that request. The outcome is operation completed. Maybe it can be somehow misleading. Nevertheless, what I can find in the run history is that all right, so in try block, I see it has failed. Yeah, there is this connectivity issue, so it's unable to get information why it failed. But again, the error is around the authentication token. Maybe just refresh it, or maybe not. Anyway, in catch block, there is a concept or a construction that I'm using very often to handle errors. Obviously, in every flow I'm building, I'm trying to follow this same schema. And that's a smart thing to do. What am I doing actually in the catch block? First thing, I'm filtering outcomes of the try block. So by using the function that is called result, it is not really directly present in expressions in Power Automate. It's coming from Logic App. But the point is that if you use this expression result and then you put name of the action, you will get all the details from that action. And then when speaking about the scope, it will give like a big listing of outcomes of every action that happens inside that scope. So what I'm doing next is I'm filtering that JSON, that result, to get only those items which are having status containing either failed or timeout information. And then for each such item, I'm simply appending this information to a variable and sending myself this digest email with information about all actions that have failed in that flow. So that is actually the pattern I'm really using in my flows. Then in this scenario, and finally, there is the response because I always want to send something back to the requester. So with that, we have the try-catch pattern together with information about why the flow failed and details from actually the run. All right, any question to that so far? Yeah, Andre, the point is that, well, the blog post is from 2019, but this pattern and actually everything I'm describing there is still up to date. So
yeah, I know that.
That things haven't changed.
Yeah, absolutely okay.
Right. So I'll now jump over to application insights because apart from having this kind of information or being notified directly through emails that something has failed, many companies, including the one that I'm working for, wants as well to have some kind of logging. So wants to have then data to be for the analysis to find out the patterns and work better with the flows. So what we can do is to use application insights. Now, what is right? So that is used to log data. That was my last words. And since February 2020, this feature is integrated, this service is integrated with Powerapps. So you can nearly directly write information from Powerapps to application insights. However, with Power Automate, it's much more complicated. So basically, let me now jump over to, well, the demo actually, or maybe not. What do I have before I jump to demos? Yeah, that is the information I wanted to, that I already said. So with Power Automate, it's a bit more complicated because if we want to use application insights in Power Automate, what we have to do is first, we need to create an Azure function because the API for application insights is for C#, is for Node, and so on and so on, but there is no REST API. So we actually have to write some kind of a proxy to write to application insights API. Okay, so let me show you how this actually works. I have another few examples. So I have now example number 4. So again, I'll trigger it. And well, it's taking a bit more time as expected. Or maybe let me just switch over to this flow. Okay, so this time, this flow might look the same as the previous one. However, apart from actually sending me the email that something failed, it is also for each error logging that information to application insights. What is it logging? So it's logging the correlation ID, which is actually the flow ID. So this instance ID. It's logging information about the environment ID. So again, I am able then to have one place to get information about logs and about the issues from every environment. And then as for the flow name, its URL, the action that actually failed, the reason, and so on, like all the information that might be useful to then further debug or build some reports and get some patterns around what is failing, why it is failing, what are the actions that are most commonly failing, and so on. Now, once I navigate to the Graph API, sorry, it's here. Sorry. Once I navigate to Flow Insights, so to the service in Azure, what I have to do actually to find those logs is to go to logs, obviously, and it takes like around 5 minutes to actually so let me just refresh it. Ouch. Why do you ask me to sign in? All right. So as said, it's taking like around 5 minutes for this information to appear in logs. Now I have my favorite query that is called the flow exception. So it is showing me all those exceptions where type is error in Power Automate because that's the information. It's here. That's the information that I do. No, I do write that information, that type of an error is written by the Azure function. Okay, so once I hit it, yeah, that's the one. So this is the last log that I have created. And there you have all the information that is being logged, plus all those custom information I have added. So the information I just showed you in that action, so the action name, the error code, the description, so why it failed, the flow URL, so the instance URL, again, the flow name, that tracking ID, and so on and so on. So everything that actually can be useful for future debugging to just get information or just somehow to report those information in Power BI, for example. And now with all these flow insights, you can, for example, export them to Excel, or you can just export them to Power BI and create yourself a report on top of them. So I find it very useful. I will not show you now the Azure function I'm using. If you're interested, just ping me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I can then share it with you as we don't have enough time. Last thing I just wanted to show you is this site provision notification that I call this, let's say, advanced notification. Why? Well, because apart from having the general try catch pattern implemented, it is also having implementation of the try catch on the every action that actually can fail. So here I have another try catch that is only catching errors on the calling graph API and is catching them. Because one thing you have to be aware is that that result function I just showed you, which is getting information back from the scope, is only getting information from the first level of actions. So if, for example, in a try block, you have condition or a loop or another scope, then it will not get details of that action which failed inside that block, but it will get information from the block. So for example, if you have a condition and there was an action which failed, you'll get information. But you won't get information about that specific action which failed. And so in that case, you should implement this error handling even deeper. Plus, what is very bad about this result function is that you cannot pass name of the action dynamically. So you cannot make like a iterational loop which goes deep into the structure of a scope and gets details about every action by providing its name. It has to be hard-coded. So that's the downside of this function. And one last thing I recommend you is that once you do error handling, error catching, and you catch the error, it is really a good idea to add at the end of a catch block or any catch part of the logic, the terminate action that actually ends the flow with a fail outcome. Why? Well, because later on, once you navigate to the runs history and you want to actually find that flow that failed, and you will only see that every flow has ended up successfully, it will be hard for you to simply find that one that actually failed. And therefore, if you use the terminate action with a failed outcome, you'll at least know which actually flow failed, which instance failed. So that's a best practice from me. All right. Andrea, I have no idea what's happening with this connection. I think I should really restart my computer and maybe that should work, but I don't have time for that right now. So now the test. All right, people, you have a test. You can now think on your side, on your own, which are the correct answers. There is always just one answer correct for each question. All right, this time I made a bit of checks myself. So first, which of the box tool provides largest info about errors? Well, from these three is obviously Power Automate Run History, although there should be as well Power Automate Cloud Flows Monitor. Oh, sorry, I haven't showed you that. It's really important to know. So once you go under the monitor, there you have this Cloud Flow activity. And this is the place I told you that gives you this Hawkeye view on how your flows in this specific environment are performing. So then you can filter out to only those which failed. And so you get the details around those failed. All right. Second one, the most useful tools for error handling are in Power Automate. What I meant and obviously those scopes and run after. Now for the third one, which for options has run after configuration, that is obviously successful, failed, skipped, and timed out. And the fourth one, why should we handle errors? Obviously all above plus much, much more. So there is lots of reasons to handle errors. I guess everyone can at least think of one. So, but basically the point is that to be somehow like proactive, to be way before the business and way before the users who are then going to complain that your flows are failing. So if you know that the flows are failing, or having time to fix them or restart them or do whatever just to hide those errors before the business finds out. All right, and with having that said, let's switch to debugging, because one thing is to create a flow and to see that it's failing. And the other thing is to actually find out why it is failing. So like, what is the reason of failures and how to work with the flow to get down to the action that fails and try to find out why. So basically, in the life of a developer, whichever developer it is, low code, no code, pro code, whatever, there are like 5 stages of frustration with errors. So first, we write the code and we are definitely sure, like we write the code, we write Power Automate, we write logic, and we are just really sure that it should be working because we did follow documentation, we did write everything as it was described on blog posts on the internet, but for some reason it's not working. And we're just really getting nuts and not able to do anything but being frustrated. And so next we are starting this debugging. So like, we don't know what is not working, where it isn't working, but we're just trying to find out why and then fix it. Also, the point is that it usually takes us a very short time to create something, and then we are spending lots of time on finding reasons why it's not working. And we end up staring at the monitor and murmuring something to ourselves. So this kind of mental illness is really a good comparison. So we're just staring at the monitor, talking to ourselves, trying to find out why it's not working. And then suddenly, ta-da, we just click one thing, we just change that letter, we just change that typo, and it's starting to work again. So after just a longer while, maybe not hours, maybe half an hour, we are really done and we are happy, but we are so tired after this debugging. So that's our life. That's the developer's life. I think I need to debug my network connection. So basically, with debugging Power Automate, there are like 2 possible ways of getting information what went wrong. So first, we can just read the outcomes of the flow, which is usually very informative. So we can just go to the instance details. We can see which action failed, what were the reason why it failed. And then we can try to like somehow modify the flow to actually either exclude that action or to replace it with something else to see if the rest of our flow is working fine. It's like what would happen if that action could be successfully completed. So what is our flow doing? So even though that action is failing, we can simply try to exclude it to see the whole logic of the flow. So I want to share some ideas, some techniques around the debugging that we can use in Power Automate. So first, when speaking about the outcomes, obviously the first and the most important thing when creating a flow is the flow checker. So that's this small doctor's instrument in the top right corner of the UI, of the Power Automate UI, that shows all the information about warnings and errors that are occurring in our Power Automate. By fixing them, you're then able to save the flow. However, the flow checker is not actually saying that, for example, the authentication key or the secret key has expired. So then the second thing is the run history, which actually gives us information which flows failed. And last thing is the error details. So we navigate to the specific instance and we read the error details. So we see which action failed and why. Now the second dimension is the one that we are starting to work with flows. And so first, for example, if our flow is failing on the trigger, we can simply replace this trigger with manual trigger and then providing input information manually just to see how the flow is running. So like not focusing on the trigger, simply focusing on the logic. If flow failed and we don't actually want to navigate to the external source and then trigger the flow again, send that HTTP request again, or I don't know, approve that file on SharePoint again, we can simply go to flow instance that failed and resubmit it. Therefore, it will run again with the same data as at the moment when it failed. Next, if we want to stop flow at a specific action so that we don't want to execute other actions, we can use the terminate action. So we just put it in the logic, and so the flow will stop right on that action. Also, it's very useful functionality that be executed. We can turn it off by switching it to only like display or use the static data. And lastly, we can as well use the run after to create branches or scopes in flow, which are executed or not executed, depending on our logic. So if we want just to like turn off a block of actions in the flow, we can put them in a scope, then set the scope to be run, for example, if the previous action times out, which possibly would never happen. And then we have those specific actions turned off. All right. So let me just go back to my examples and let's just try to think of, I'll just show you them in live. So first, working with the reason, the outcomes of flows. So either from runs history or from Cloudflow activity, you can navigate to this Cloudflow instance that failed. And here you can read information about the failure. So first, you have that information notification on the action that failed. So once you expand it, you have details about the reason why it failed. Plus, you have this large tile on the right side with the same actually information that shows the reason of failure. Plus, what is quite nice from Microsoft is that we have those information here that as well helps us sometimes to fix the error. In that case, because that's the HTTP request and there can be like hundreds of reasons why it failed, there's this suggested fix is not very helpful. However, if this is, for example, an action around SharePoint which is failing, here you will be able to find even threads from Power Automate forum that have been resolved. So you can navigate there and try your luck. Possibly that suggested thread will help you to resolve the issue on your side as well. So this is the first place that we can actually, or the first and the only actually, how we can debug. So here we see which action failed and why. Now, if you would like, for example, now to work with that action, to maybe turn it off just to see what would happen if this action completed successfully, so that we want to execute the rest of the logic. What we can do is, as mentioned, we can simply go under the ellipsis icon, and here we have those static results. This is the feature that helps us to turn off this action. And here we can provide the outcomes that will be given to the other actions as a static data. So apart from the outcome and the code, we can, for example, switch to this dynamic view. Right, we'll just here, so that apart from defining headers, we can as well define the body. I have body defined in a notepad on my side. So with that, I will simply pass a static information, like if the site was created. So it will send to the next action all these JSON outcomes that is expected. So with that, I have now this action turned off, so it won't actually call Graph API. As you can see, there is this icon for static results. So if I now save it and resubmit it, even though this secret key is wrong, is malformed because I made it to be malformed or expired, don't remember, and I run again with the recently used trigger, so the one that has failed, you'll see that this action is now completed successfully, right? So it has been completed successfully. As the outcomes, it is simply returning the information I put as a static values, and then the correct flow of the correct logic of the flow is being executed. So that's one thing that we can do. The other thing, if you would like to simply turn it off, is, as mentioned, we can put like a scope. And then inside that scope, we can add this action. Now this will damage the whole logic, but whatever. So I have to simply re-click the run after. And here, what I can do is to configure these scopes run after that I would like to only run it, for example, if the secret is skipped. Well, obviously, secret won't be skipped because it will be executed always. But here, now in this correct branch, I can select that I want this JSON parsing to be executed if the scope is succeeded or if it is skipped. Because right now, the scope is going to be skipped because secret is always going to be executed. So that's another attempt or another scenario you can use to simply turn off a part of the logic so that you can simply execute rest of your flow to see how it's working, if there are any errors, and so on. So again, here, once I save and test it, logic in my flow will go the left side to the left side. Possibly it will fail. Yes, it is failing because the outcomes of the action of this action is unavailable since it was not executed, and therefore the parse JSON is failing. So again, what I could do to make it even either to create your another parallel branch to execute a different logic, or for example, to add here an action that is going to simply terminate this flow. Right, so this is the magic control. And I can say, okay, simply end this flow with a succeeded outcome, run this action even if the scope is skipped. And so with that, I will be able to see like what would happen in my flow if, again, it has completed successfully. Obviously, by terminating this flow on that action, I got nothing because neither the request was executed or sent email was executed, or even the response was executed. But the point is that if you had a longer flow and you simply wanted to turn off rest of the logic and just focus on that action that is being errored, you could simply add this terminate action, which would prevent your flow, for example, from creating data in SharePoint or updating files or doing whatever whenever the logic, well, makes this flow to work after that specific action is completed. All right, so so those are the tools, those mechanisms or ways you can actually work with Power Automate to help you debug that action that is failing, and then to work with rest of the flow's logic to exclude some steps or just terminate the flow on the logic that you want to check and then run it over and over again. And right, so with that having said, I want to have the last test of yourself. There are again 4 questions. The 4th one is an open discussion. So if you are brave enough to unmute yourself and simply say why you think why you think debugging is often so problematic in Power Automate, then please say it. So for the first question, how can we debug errors in flows? Well, obviously using the flow checker, run history, and instance details. Now, the best way to turn off a single action is obviously to turn on static results. That's the most powerful way to turn off the action. Then the best way to turn off block of actions is to put them in a scope, obviously. All right, so anyone wants to speak out and say why you think debugging is problematic? Or maybe what issues, what errors have you faced when debugging? What you are
Hi, Victor, your mic is on mute.
Oh, I had this nice speech. I was actually mimicking. I was saying something nice. Just kidding. No, one of the things that was a point in the conversation here in one of the previous sessions was seeing outputs of each particular step. When you look at the run history, for example, you fetch data from Dataverse and you want to see the output of it on the particular instance details. So that was one point of complaint. So I don't know if there is a better way to do it than trying to put the output on like a composite step and then seeing what's coming down. Compose, sorry. But that was one alternative. But it would be nice if we could, I don't know, hover over and see the outputs.
Well, but basically, but basically, if you just go into the actions, and there is also those raw outputs. So, like whatever happens, like if the action is actually returning anything, like this one, you're always able to see those outputs and inputs. So you don't have to actually use a compose, but you can just simply display those outputs or inputs.
Yeah, and that shows what's the particular connector and whatnot, but we had to resort to compose action.
Yeah. Also, well, I guess that there might be a situation that this compose is much more useful, or because maybe you want to display some specific information that is not so visible when going to those raw inputs or raw outputs. But yeah. So, anyone else?
Andrew always has something to say. He's shy.
No, I only think that sometimes the error messages are very often, very unclear and in Power Automate, and so you have to search a lot of blocks and for solving those issues, and that's my experience with that.
That's what I said. It's like writing flow for 5 minutes and debugging for 5 hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's the world we're living in. So
yeah, welcome to Power Automate.
Yep.
Yeah, but I really like the my goodness, I just blanked out the scope block, because we talked about it in the same concept as regions in code. Create a region and if you could expand or collapse the details, so scope will come in handy for me.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's really handy. And well, the only downside of scope is that I said when you use that result function, maybe I have it somewhere here. Yeah. So that result function expression is really useful, but as said, you cannot pass the name of the function of the action dynamically. So it has to be hard coded. And if you, for example, use I don't know, like any kind of control like loop for condition or switch, and then something within that switch fails, then scope will catch an error on the switch level, not on that action. So it will not show, the result function will not actually give you details of the failure of the specific action, but at least it will catch some errors. So it will give something to help you debug.
I see. It'll point us to the right direction at least, right?
Yes, indeed. All right, so once again, thank you very much. And if you do have any questions or would like to discuss any further, or maybe you would like to see that Azure function code, and simply reach out to me on aka.ms/Poszytek or through email or whatever. And hope to see you soon somewhere.
All right.
And just once again, very sorry for these connectivity issues. No idea why it's coming. I mean, why it was happening.
Yeah, I'll try to edit the video so that we have less gaps, but I mean the content is worthwhile though. No complaints on my side. Alrighty. Well, thanks everybody. We'll see you next week. Next week, I think we're gonna do it on a different time. Reason being is because we have Eliza Benitez present,
Australia.
and she's in Australia. So
I think she's in from New Zealand.
yeah, or Australia. Yeah, one of the two. But it'll be very late for her, so we'll do it. I think we do an hour earlier. So I'll send updates throughout the week. Okay. All right, everyone. We'll see you next Thursday. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.